I don't know when I stopped being someone you made room for. The message came mid-morning, somewhere between reviewing a procurement report and realizing I'd let the second cup of coffee go cold. The screen lit up Lindsay Roth. I hadn't heard from her since she left logistics at the company, remarried, and moved to Arizona. There was no subject line, only a single attachment, seating chart, Logan 5.pdf. I opened it out of habit, not curiosity. The chart was efficient, Claire's work, color-coded, balanced. At the top, Scott Easton. Beside him, Claire Jennings Easton. Her parents took the seats to the right. Across the table were names I didn't recognize: investors from her nonprofit board, a speech therapist, a school administrator, someone listed as media contact. Their affiliations were more important than their relationships. I scrolled without knowing why. Then again, slower. There was no Gloria Easton anywhere, not under family, not even among the courtesy invites. Just empty chairs filled by professionals. My name wasn't overlooked, it was removed. I minimized the window. Checked my calendar. Nothing blocked. No invitation tucked into the mail tray. I opened my messages with Scott. No mention of Logan's birthday. No group chat. No hint. Claire's last text from 2 months ago hovered in its own bubble. If you're thinking of getting Logan another book, please check with me first. We're being mindful of themes. I refreshed my inbox anyway. Still nothing. I sat for a while staring at the edge of my desk. The lacquer had worn in one corner, smoothed by years of elbows and quiet thinking. A tiny crack ran beneath the surface, barely visible but permanent. I traced it with my finger. The fifth document in my tray that day was a partnership memo. Claire had marked it in pencil. Faint, efficient. Let me know if this still requires Gloria's sign-off. Might be outdated. Outdated. Joan knocked once before stepping in. She held out a printout, last-minute figures for the upcoming advisory board. Would you like the car brought around? I told her no. I needed to walk. There are kinds of silence that only pavement understands. Their house sat at the edge of the old neighborhood, painted white with navy shutters like every other house that pretends not to compete. From the curb, I could see the driveway lined with rental cars, the kind brought by people who don't stay long but want to be seen arriving. I held my purse with both hands. I wasn't sure if I'd come to deliver something or to apologize for still existing. Claire opened the door. Cream silk high-collar earrings that caught light and conversation. Her hair was pulled tight, as if she could control the world by narrowing the frame. No hello, just her eyes resting on me long enough to register the misstep. I wasn't expecting you, she said slowly. Scott's upstairs with the event team. I nodded once. I saw the chart. She didn't pretend to misunderstand. We stood there, the threshold between us like a drawn curtain. She folded her arms carefully, measured, not defensive. We thought, maybe this year would be different. She didn't say better, just different, controlled. Logan's doing really well with structure. We've been working hard on keeping things consistent, predictable. I looked past her. A string of paper stars hung along the hallway. I could hear someone laughing, though I couldn't say it was Logan. It might have been the sound of someone else's child or no child at all. I won't stay, I said. Claire's nod was gentle. Practiced. That might be best for everyone. There was no apology, no mention of misunderstanding, just a quiet denial dressed as concern. As I stepped back, she added, "It's not personal." That was the last thing I heard before the door closed. I walked to the car slowly. The key fob slipped from my fingers once and landed on the sidewalk with a plastic thud. I left it there for a moment. Picking it up too quickly would have felt like pretending it didn't fall. Back home, I boiled water. pulled down the old mug, the one from a 1992 tech conference. The logo was mostly gone. A faint triangle remained. I'd liked its weight, the way it felt more like clay than glass. The steam curled up, hovered, disappeared. I didn't drink it. I didn't cry. Not out of restraint. Just routine. Some habits were no longer emotional, they were procedural. I checked the mail, a bank statement, a catalog for shoes I would never wear, a real estate flyer with a blonde woman smiling beneath the words, "Let me help you move forward." She had Claire's eyes. Or maybe just her teeth. I tore it in half and dropped it into the bin without folding it. I didn't eat dinner that night. I ironed pillowcases, rearranged the books on the hallway shelf by color, then by author, then back again. In the closet, I pressed a pale blue blouse. One button had loosened. I found a needle and sat by the window, mending it slow, deliberate loops, the way my mother taught me before either of us knew how to defend ourselves in other ways. At 10:07, my phone buzzed. A reminder from the alumni board. Nothing from Scott, nothing from Claire, not even a forwarded photo of Logan in a party hat. I set the phone face down. The house was still, not quiet. Stillness has its own gravity. I didn't say anything. Not to them, not to myself. But in the morning, I found the date, Logan's birthday, and drew a clean, straight line through it in ink. Not to erase it. Just so I'd remember not to expect anything next year. I used to think that keeping still was a kind of grace. There was a box in my closet, linen-covered, tied with twine instead of ribbon. Inside were things I never threw away. A birthday card signed, "Thanks for everything." G. A paper turkey Logan made with crooked feathers, and a receipt from the toy store, where I bought him a wooden train, later returned. Claire preferred educational gifts. She once replaced my puzzle set with a tablet. He needs to stay ahead. Wooden toys are charming, but not competitive. I didn't argue. I kept the receipt. The train had been carved from maple, sanded down along the edges, not perfect. There was a tiny scratch on the caboose where I'd tested it on my desk to see if the wheels rolled smoothly. At Logan's 3rd birthday, I handed it to him in a cloth bag I'd sewn myself. Claire took it before he opened it, smiled too widely, and said, "He'll love this. But let's keep it at Grandma's house so he doesn't get confused." I nodded. That night, I saw the bag on the kitchen counter next to the recycling bin, still tied. Once at a Christmas brunch, Claire rearranged the seating. I'd been placed at the far end of the table next to a family friend from her side who asked if I was the aunt who bakes. I corrected her softly. "I'm his grandmother." She looked puzzled. "But you're not in any of the photos." I folded my napkin and pretended not to hear. Later, Claire brought out a tray of desserts she ordered from a patisserie downtown. I had made ginger cookies. She placed them on a separate plate in the kitchen. "Some people might have allergies," she said without meeting my eyes. I left them there, untouched. When Scott asked me to transfer shares into his name, he didn't frame it as a request. "It makes tax sense," he said. "You're not going to be using it much longer anyway." I signed the documents in silence. The pen left a smear on my palm that didn't wash off until the next morning. He didn't say thank you. He said, "We'll take care of it from here." I told myself it was fine. That the point of legacy was to let go. Claire never called me Mom. She called me Gloria, sometimes G. I once signed a card to Logan as Grandma, only to find it readdressed in her handwriting, from Gloria. When I brought it up, Claire looked surprised. We don't want to confuse him with too many titles. He's still learning family roles. Still learning. At 4. I stopped correcting the envelopes. I started using blank cards. Once during a company dinner, someone mistook Claire for the founder of Easton Technologies. She laughed lightly and didn't correct them. Scott was standing beside her. He adjusted his cufflinks and moved on to another conversation. Joan saw me from across the room. Later, she whispered, "Should I have said something?" I shook my head. It doesn't matter. But it did. Quietly. Repetitively. Like a dripping faucet you stop noticing until the stain forms under the sink. I wore the same watch to every family event. A gift from my husband. Steel band worn around the clasp. It clicked every time I adjusted it. I liked the sound. It reminded me that something still fit. Claire once offered to replace it. "We can find something more elegant. That piece is very vintage." I told her I preferred it that way. She smiled. "Of course." At Logan's preschool recital, I arrived early and sat in the back. Claire passed by without acknowledging me. After the performance, when I stood to greet him, she crouched beside him first. We waved to everyone, but only hug the people who stay for dinner. I left before dessert. They told me once indirectly that I lingered, that I brought energy that didn't fit the room. Claire called it a different rhythm. Scott didn't speak. He checked his watch. Not the one I gave him for graduation, the newer one, smart and faceless. I drove home that night without turning on the radio. Silence is louder when it's earned. There were things I tried, bringing flowers, complimenting Claire's centerpieces, reading parenting books she left on the kitchen counter, laughing when I didn't understand the joke. I bought matching sweaters, once one for Logan, one for Scott. Claire said gently, "Let's keep gifts simple next year. Logan already has so many things." I never brought sweaters again. For a while, I believed if I stayed polite, stayed small, stayed agreeable, the shape of me would eventually fit. The problem with shrinking is that you disappear evenly. I learned to measure silences, the ones that settled like dust on unasked questions, the ones that widened each time I was not corrected, not defended, not called. Joan once asked, "Do you ever tell them how it feels?" I smiled. They know what they need to know. The last time Logan hugged me without prompting, he had peanut butter on his chin. He pressed his face into my coat and whispered something I didn't catch. Claire was wiping his hands before he let go. Later in the car, I noticed the stain. I didn't clean it for weeks. It faded eventually. That was the year I stopped baking ginger cookies. I brought wine instead. Claire thanked me. It pairs well with the lamb. No one asked how I was, or what I'd been working on, or whether I had plans for the winter. I cleared my own plate, washed it, dried it, left it on the rack without a word. I used to think keeping still was a form of peacekeeping. That quietness meant strength. That understanding your place meant being wise enough not to disrupt. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe it was just a different kind of vanishing. I used to count how often I was remembered. Then I learned to count how often I was left out. There was a celebration at the company years ago, 5 years since the first acquisition. Someone had arranged a slideshow. There were speeches, catered trays, a commemorative plaque that someone else now keeps in their office. I had prepared a few notes, nothing long. A memory about the early days, the folding chairs, the time the server crashed, and we patched it with duct tape and a borrowed fan. Before I could speak, the head of marketing stepped up with a bouquet for Claire, for her tireless efforts on our brand story. The room applauded. Someone mentioned a woman's touch. I waited for my name. It didn't come. I folded my notes into my lap, smoothed the edge of the paper until it softened. Later, someone complimented me on the catering choice. I hadn't picked it. At home, I set the notes on the desk and never looked at them again. The envelope I'd written 5 years on in pencil is still in the drawer. Scott's graduation came with a letter. Not from him, a thick cardstock envelope addressed to the Easton household. Inside, a folded note from Claire. To the family who raised him to be strong, kind, and visionary. Your support shaped everything he's become. I scanned it twice. There was no mention of me by name. There was a photo attached. Claire and Scott standing with the dean, her hand lightly on his shoulder. My name was on the check that covered that degree, but not on the caption she posted. When I brought it up once without sharpness, Claire gave me a narrow smile. It's a team effort. My parents gave him structure. You gave him ambition. We all contributed. I nodded. Then I set the card behind a stack of books on my shelf. It stayed there until the paper yellowed at the fold. There was a drawing Logan made last spring. It came home folded inside his school folder, tucked between behavior reports and a permission slip for a field trip I wasn't told about. A house, a dog, 2 tall figures and 1 small child with what looked like sunglasses. I thought it was a superhero. Scott turned the paper over and read the back. Claire had written in tidy cursive, Logan's family, Claire Daddy, Grandma Covington, Grandpa Charles. No mention of me. No second grandmother. Not even a pet name. I held the drawing a moment longer than I meant to. Claire leaned forward. He's still getting used to names. He draws what he sees most often. Then she took it back and pinned it to the refrigerator. I watched it curl at the corner by the next morning. No one straightened it. There was a Christmas card that year, glossy, heavy paper, photo of the 3 of them in matching pajamas beside an artificial fireplace. Claire in red Scott and navy Logan, holding a cup of marshmallows, smiling too wide. The back read, "Warm wishes from the Easton family." There was no mention of me. Not even a handwritten note. Joan had received one too. She showed it to me, hesitating. Hers had a line in black ink. "Thank you for your loyalty this year. We're grateful for your presence." Mine did not. I placed it in the back of the drawer with the pencil stubs and expired gift cards. Later, I moved it to the box with other things that felt more like placeholders than gestures. Claire once curated a slideshow for Logan's birthday. I was in one photo barely visible behind a balloon arch. Claire narrated over it. This was the year Logan learned to ride a bike. Grandpa Charles helped him every day. I'd held the seat the first time. I still had the bruise from when he fell sideways and his elbow caught my forearm. No one mentioned that. Afterward, I asked Scott if they needed help cleaning up. Claire answered for him. "We've got it covered. It's probably best if you rest." I stood there, dish in hand, the towel still warm. I remember signing my name to a book I'd inscribed for Logan, a copy of The Little House, one I read to Scott when he had chickenpox. Claire returned it the next week. "We're going digital with books now. Logan prefers listening." She didn't look at the dedication. It was in blue ink. My hand had trembled a little. I hadn't inscribed anything since Henry passed. I remember the pen I used. It had a silver clip and a missing cap. I still keep it, though the ink is dry. At one of the quarterly family meetings, Claire insisted on calling them, that she handed out agenda sheets. The logo was redesigned. The tagline had changed. My name was listed under Founder Emeritus, in italics. Claire smiled across the table. We wanted to honor the early structure while moving into a more fluid phase. I didn't speak. Scott flipped through the packet and said nothing. Later, Claire left a sticky note on my folder. "Let us know if you need help navigating the new structure." The word navigate felt surgical, as if I needed assistance moving through a space I had drawn by hand. In the lobby of the company, the wall of founders had been redone. My photo remained, but it had been moved to the far right. A new quote sat beneath Claire's image. "Leadership is not inherited. It's earned through innovation." No one mentioned when it was updated. The receptionist told a visiting board member that Claire had transformed the company's narrative. I waited for the next sentence. It didn't come. I pressed my finger once against the glass beneath my own name. The print stayed for a second, then disappeared. It's not violence that erases you. It's the repetition of being politely misplaced. I stopped expecting my name to be printed. I started bringing my own notepads to meetings. Blank, unbranded. When the printer broke down and someone asked who to call, I gave them the number out of habit. The intern thanked me, then looked surprised when I said I still worked here. I keep a drawer of things people forget they gave me. A thank you note with the wrong date, a pen that skips, a bookmark from a fundraiser I was not invited to attend. None of them are heavy, but they pile. I used to keep track of who left me out. Now I keep track of what I stopped bringing. This year, I didn't send a card. Not because I was making a point, just because I wasn't sure who would notice. I used to think legacy was something solid, something that held its shape. The elevator hummed as it climbed past the 20th floor. I pressed the same button I always had 42. The carpet was new, a paler gray one shade away from sterile. I noticed one of the potted ferns was gone, replaced by a screen flashing brand colors in motion. 2 younger women stood behind me. I didn't recognize them. Interns, maybe. One whispered low, but not low enough. "She's here today, the one up for strategy director." "You know Claire." The other nudged her. A small sound, a stifled laugh. "Right. She practically runs everything already." I didn't turn around. I focused on the tiny scratch on the elevator panel right beneath the number 35. I had once made a note to get it buffed out. No one had. Claire's office was still in Campaign Division 2. Her door had her maiden name hyphenated bold font. Technically, she wasn't part of the executive wing, but I'd noticed she used the 42nd floor restroom. The keycard logs confirmed it. Joan mentioned it offhand one day, apologetic. At my desk, there was a folder waiting. Crisp blue binding, no label. Joan stood nearby, eyes lowered. She adjusted her glasses and before speaking. "Claire dropped this off. It's for signature. HR needs it to confirm departmental credits for her Q4 work." I opened it. A summary of the Southline expansion. Charts, projections, campaign reach, budget allocations. The font was Claire's preferred style rounded serif, too decorative for my taste. I flipped to the appendix. No mention of my oversight. No reference to the board meeting I chaired, the licensing approvals I had spent 3 months negotiating. I scanned it again. Claire had rephrased the timeline. My name did not appear. There were words like revitalized and modernized and under Claire Easton's directional stewardship. I turned the last page. There was a blank line for my signature. It said, "Only verified by executive oversight." Joan set down a pen beside me. Silver. The one I used for formal approvals. The weight of it in my palm felt different this time. Less tool, more test. I didn't sign it. I placed the pen horizontally across the folder. Joan hesitated, then picked it up. No questions. Just took it back. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling tile directly above my chair. There was a fine crack near the vent, like a line drawn too fast. Later that afternoon, I stepped into the executive conference room. The door hadn't been fully closed. Someone had left a draft memo on the table. It had bullet points. Leadership renewal strategy, brand modernization under Claire E. Basse. Beyond Legacy Campaign Series. I sat in the chair I used to occupy, not at the head, at the far end now. Easier not to disrupt anyone's view. The room was empty, but the screen was still active. Someone had left the playback running, a recording of the morning's leadership summit. Claire stood in front of the Easton Technologies logo. Behind her, the phrase, "future proven." Her voice was composed. Easton Technologies is no longer defined by one generation's decisions. We're here because of grit, yes. But grit belongs to the present, too. It's time, women, led by current capability, not nostalgia. A few heads in the audience nodded. One of them was Scott. He sat 2 rows back. Neutral face, no protest, no adjustment in posture. Claire continued, I respect what came before, but leadership isn't inherited. It's not sentimental. It's operational. A pause. Then applause. Not roaring, but enough. I pressed pause on the video. Claire's face froze mid-expression, determined chin slightly raised. I knew that look. I had worn it once in a boardroom full of men who didn't think I belonged. I stood up, not abruptly, just enough to feel the chair press back as it rose from me. There was a photo on the credenza by the wall. It used to be of our founding team. It had been replaced with a quote, "We don't follow trends. We build them. No attribution." Joan entered quietly with a document tray. She paused when she saw the video paused on Claire's face. She didn't comment, just placed the papers on the desk and left. Among the documents was a revised org chart. Claire's name had a dotted line connecting her to strategic direction. Below it, a note, pending confirmation Q2. My name appeared only once. Founder Emeritus. No department. No title. No dotted lines. I traced the faint crease where the paper had been folded. Later, I walked past the conference room again. Claire was inside speaking to 2 consultants in suits I didn't recognize. She wore navy and gold Easton colors, but reinterpreted no blazer soft collar. Scott stood beside her, looking down at a tablet. I slowed just slightly. Claire noticed. Her smile didn't shift. We'll have a clearer future when we let go of outdated anchors. I kept walking. No one followed. That evening, I pulled out the ring I used to wear in the early days, the one I had resized after Henry passed. It no longer fit the same way. My fingers had changed, but not enough to forget how it once sat. I set it on the table and watched how the light caught the edges. A small nick along the band, barely visible unless you knew where to look. The company used to be like that. Slight flaws, but deeply known. I folded the memo unsigned, slipped it into my briefcase. I didn't tear it. I didn't write a note. Legacy isn't what you build. It's what others claim when you stop correcting them. I didn't correct anyone that day. And I haven't since. I used to think my presence kept the wheels turning, that if I stopped showing up, the silence would ring loud enough to make someone turn around. The email I sent that morning was 6 lines. No attachments, no signatures. Just a line break between each sentence like I was catching my breath. I left my phone on the charger screen down. I didn't check to see if Scott replied. Claire never used my number anyway. If she had something to say, she preferred a forwarded memo. Joan didn't ask questions. She just placed the manila folder on my desk without a word, her fingers lingering a second longer on the corner. Inside, articles of incorporation, shared distribution, a scanned copy of the deed to the downtown property still under my name. My initials looked smaller than I remembered them. She nodded once before leaving, that was all. A part of me wanted her to linger. Another part stronger was relieved she didn't. I opened the bottom drawer, the one with the worn edges and pencil marks from when Logan used to visit. He once drew stars on the inner panel with a Sharpie. "For your rocket grandma," he whispered when he thought no one was listening. That was 3 birthdays ago. The key was in a mint tin. It had once held lemon drops. I kept it because it didn't look like anything important. Just a nondescript silver rectangle dented in one corner, the label worn smooth. I placed the key inside along with my badge and slid the tin back into the drawer. Not locked, just closed. Joan watched me as I passed the reception desk. Her mouth opened slightly, as if forming a word, but nothing came out. I gave a small nod and kept walking. In the elevator, someone entered behind me. Young, sharp cologne. He pressed 18, then looked at me and hesitated. "Are you visiting today?" I didn't respond. My reflection in the brushed metal doors didn't either. At the exit, I used the side entrance, the one near the loading dock. The security guard glanced up from his crossword, then looked back down. I didn't wave. He didn't stand. No one followed. No one asked. The parking structure was quiet, except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I sat in the car longer than I needed to. Not because I didn't know where to go, but because I did. Back home, I poured coffee into the old ceramic mug with the crack near the base. It had belonged to Richard. He used to say it made the coffee taste stronger. I never corrected him. I sat at the table and folded the printed documents once, then, twice, then again. Neat rectangles. I didn't seal them. I wasn't mailing anything yet. Later that day, the doorbell rang. A courier left a bouquet on the step. White lilies bound with navy ribbon, a small card tucked in the stems. "From all of us, thank you for your guidance. Signed, Easton Technologies." No names, no message. I placed the bouquet in the sink and ran the tap. In the evening, Scott called. First ring, second, then voicemail. "Hey, Mom. I heard you weren't in today. Everything okay? Let me know if you need anything." Pause. "Claire says hi." I didn't press play again. I already knew the words. The next morning, I didn't open my email. The messages would be there. Calendar invites, forwarded invoices, and probably a reminder from HR about quarterly reports. The machine runs whether you breathe or not. I spent the afternoon wiping down the window frames. Dust had gathered in the corners, soft as ash. I used an old toothbrush, slow and methodical. There was something respectful about cleaning the edges. Later, Joan left a voicemail. "Just checking in. Let me know if you want me to forward anything. Otherwise, I've got it covered. No pressure. No judgment. Just space." I looked at the chair by the door. My leather briefcase still sat there. The handle was fraying. Inside, I kept a single yellow legal pad with notes from the expansion plan. I hadn't looked at it in weeks. One evening, Claire sent a text. Not to me. To the group chat labeled Family. It read, "Logan's spring recital is next month. Limited seating. Let me know soon." 3 dots, then a follow-up. "Just immediate family, please." I didn't reply. I left the conversation on mute. Later that week, Scott stopped by. I heard the engine before the knock. He stood at the door in a blazer and running shoes, holding a Tupperware of something store-bought. "Claire made extra," he said. "Thought you might want it." He looked around the room, but didn't step in. His eyes landed on the dining table where the documents still sat. "Are you taking time off?" I looked at the container. The lid was slightly warped. "Joan said you haven't been in." He cleared his throat. "She's competent, but they keep asking where the signature is." He didn't mention the project, or the quote Claire had given in the board meeting, or the way the company had quietly begun scrubbing my name from the pitch decks. I nodded once, slow. "I guess you're just thinking things through." That's what he called it. Thinking things through. As if I'd misplaced my pen. He placed the food on the table next to the unsealed documents and left without waiting for an answer. That night, I stood in front of the hallway closet. The coat I used to wear to meetings still hung there, dark wool, smooth lapels. The left pocket held an old receipt from a dry cleaner that no longer existed. I left it there. Sometimes letting go doesn't need ceremony. It just needs silence. The sound of the kettle took longer to arrive than it used to. Or maybe I was just hearing it fully for the first time. There was no other noise to compete. No muted phone calls. No footsteps pacing outside my office door. No reminders pinging about meetings I didn't want, but always attended. I had packed light. A small duffel, a folder of personal documents, and the cardigan with the fraying cuff that no one ever commented on. The apartment by the lake had always been there waiting, but I had never really been in it. It still smelled faintly of cedar and lemon polish, things my old housekeeper used when I first bought it. I made no effort to replace that scent with anything new. I learned slowly how to make coffee for one. I had spent decades pouring for rooms for staff, for board members, for guests I didn't remember inviting. The act had always been automatic, even ceremonial. Now it was only a matter of heating water and scooping just enough for the white porcelain mug with the tiny chip near the rim. I kept that mug. It didn't pretend to be whole. The drawer in the hallway had always been full of keys, ones I didn't remember receiving, ones I no longer needed. I held each one briefly, placed them in a bowl, and slid it toward the back of the closet. The only key I kept on my chain was the one that opened the back door to this apartment. It had a dull groove worn smooth from years of being passed over. "I didn't know you were still using that place," Scott had once mentioned over dinner sometime before the shift. "Claire thought you'd sold it." I had only nodded. There were things better left uncorrected. The calendar on the fridge still read February, though it was well into April. I left it. The months didn't argue. I crossed out the dates manually now with a black pen. The kind that didn't bleed, didn't leave a trace of hesitation. I didn't write appointments, just crossed off what had passed. Joan had texted once, just once. "Do you want me to keep the orchid on your desk watered?" I replied with a single word. "No." That was enough. The silence didn't echo. It softened. I no longer dressed to neutralize myself. The muted blues and tailored beige stayed folded. I wore linen, sometimes wrinkled. The lake didn't care. Neither did the barista at the corner cafe who called everyone friend and didn't know my last name. "I thought you'd be taller," the barista had said the third time I came in. I didn't respond. I had nothing to correct. Let her imagine someone else. The journals I once locked away, I took out. I didn't read them. I tore out the pages one by one and lined the drawer with them, not out of anger, out of finality. Then I started a new one. Spiral-bound, nothing elegant. I wrote in cursive, even though my hand cramped more quickly now. I wrote things like, "Today the mail didn't arrive until afternoon. No one noticed but me." That was enough. There were photos I didn't bring. The ones from the retirement dinner, the ones from Logan's christening, the framed cover of the magazine, where Scott and Claire smiled just to the right of my shoulder. The edge of my blazer had made it into the shot barely. "We owe everything to Legacy," the caption had read. The legacy went unnamed. Once at a grocery store nearby, I saw a boy about Logan's age tugging at his grandmother's sleeve. "Nana, look," he said, holding up a wrinkled drawing. She bent down, kissed the paper. I turned down the next aisle without picking up the oatmeal I'd come for. I never answered the email about the Easton Technologies board meeting. "We'll need your signature on the revised charter." I let it sit. I imagined someone refreshing their inbox, wondering if I was ignoring them. I was. "I always thought you'd outgrow sentiment," my sister once told me over the phone after I'd cried about a broken necklace. "It makes people uncomfortable when women your age still carry that kind of softness." I didn't reply. I pressed the receiver to my ear and waited until the line went silent, then placed it back in the cradle. There is a chipped tile in the hallway of the apartment. I step over it each morning, not because I'm avoiding it, but because it reminds me that not everything has to be repaired. Some mornings I leave the radio on static, just to hear something imperfect. I don't adjust the dial. There is a pale green coat hanging by the door. I don't remember when I last wore it, but I don't move it. It hangs there like punctuation, silent, inert, but saying enough. I once read that it takes 30 days to break a pattern. I stopped counting after 12. Today, I wiped down the windowsill with a rag made from an old shirt, the kind Scott used to wear when he helped me in the garden. Before college, before Claire, before the word mom slipped into Gloria like it was just evolution. There is no conclusion, no finality in my leaving. I didn't close a door to make a point. I just stepped away from the hallway that never had space for my shoes. The orchids at Joan's desk probably bloomed, or maybe they didn't. That isn't mine to wonder anymore. The first ring didn't even register. The second one made me reach for the mug, only to realize it was cold. I let it ring out. On the third call, I glanced at the screen. Scott's name. No photo attached, just a gray silhouette. I wiped the edge of the mug with my sleeve and let the phone ring a fourth time before picking up. "I think we need to discuss representation for the board," he began. "You're still holding voting power, right? No hello. No how are you." Not even a pause to acknowledge the month that had passed without a single word. My name still sat on the company charter. My shares had not evaporated just because my chair was empty. He didn't wait long before continuing. "It's just optics. The partners expect a unified front at the next earnings call. We thought maybe you could be present. Just for the photo." I looked at the envelope from the pharmacy unopened. The refill label smudged from where I'd set down my tea last night. Across the table sat a jar of apricot jam I hadn't touched, and a white orchid wilting from the edge. "Of course you wouldn't need to speak," Scott said. "Just sit in." I didn't reply. Not with words. Just let the silence open its arms around us until he finally cleared his throat. Then the line clicked, and he was gone. Later that day, Joan forwarded an email, Claire's name in bold. The subject line read, "Media Alignment, March Tech Forum." Below was a list of bullet points: brand cohesion, family, narrative, legacy, continuity. We'd appreciate a short appearance by Gloria to anchor the family image, she wrote. Preferably in something neutral. No sharp jewelry or dark tones. No mention of what I might think, or why I had disappeared. Only the roles they needed filled like a casting notice sent to the wrong actress. The mug left a faint ring on the letter I had meant to mail last week. I'd written it on linen paper using the same fountain pen that left a blue ink splotch on my right middle finger. It wasn't meant for anyone. Just a note to myself. If they reach out, check the reason. Claire's words during the investor call returned, but this time not in her voice, in mine. I repeated them aloud like a line from an unfamiliar script. It's time for modern leadership, not legacy. It had almost sounded empowering then. Now it just sounded practiced. I remember once asking Claire if Logan had opened the science kit I bought him. It was around Thanksgiving. She looked up from her tablet and adjusted her blouse. "We gave it to the shelter," she said. "Logan's more into coding now. We didn't want him confused. No follow-up, no thank you. Just a decision already made tied with a ribbon of finality." Now, with her email on my screen, I noticed the same tone. Not cruel. Just settled. Like my relevance was a closet someone had already cleaned out. I took out the old shoebox I'd kept beneath the bed. Inside were 2 lanyards, one from the first tech conference, where Easton Technologies had a booth, the other from the day we signed our Series A. Both faded. One still had the scent of orange hand sanitizer. The company name was still mine in legal terms, but their calls and emails weren't about stewardship. They were about filling space. Joan texted next, a quiet message, polite. "They're circulating talking points." "Do you want to see the draft?" I typed. "No," and deleted it. typed "thank you" and deleted that too. Then I put the phone face down beside the windowsill and turned the orchid's pot toward the morning light, as if it might make a difference. The kettle boiled with a low hum. I poured it over the same tea leaves I had been stretching out for days. They left a faint, reddish trace along the rim of the pot. I didn't mind. The mug still bore the hairline crack from years ago. I traced it absently while the inbox blinked with another message. Board meeting document sign-off required the subject read. Not a single line addressed me directly. Not "Dear Gloria," not even "Hi." Just headers and attachments and a deadline. I clicked through. No mention of my absence, only phrases like "transition of legacy presence" and "retired advisory founder." I shut the laptop without closing the window. The whir of the fan died a few seconds later. There was a time when Scott would ask about my thoughts before a product launch. Not because he needed approval, he just valued the way I read between the market lines. Now he needed my face. Not my mind, not my voice. Just a placeholder. An emblem. I opened my wallet. Tucked behind a grocery receipt was a snapshot of Logan Barely 3 holding a rubber dinosaur and biting the corner of a cracker. His cheeks were full and flushed. On the back, my handwriting. First day at Grandma's, he liked the blue blanket best. I didn't frame it. I don't know why. Maybe I knew this moment would stay better hidden than displayed. The phone buzzed again. Not a call. Just a group text from Claire, family dinner at 6 on Sunday. Need RSVP for head count. No name. No direct tag. Just another circular message where my inclusion felt like a checkbox. Someone wasn't sure whether to tick or skip. I didn't respond. Instead, I folded the linen paper letter and slipped it into the envelope without sealing it. Not everything needs to be sent. Some things are written just so you remember what mattered when no one else did. And I let the kettle cool without pouring a second cup. I never noticed how the rosemary curved until I trimmed it myself. Not sharply, not with the impatience of someone cutting to get it done, but with 2 fingers steady on the stem and a small pair of shears I bought from the church rummage sale. The man at the market had nodded toward the herbs and asked if I cooked. I told him I didn't cook for a table anymore, just for a plate. He didn't ask more. I liked that. I returned home with exactly what I needed: 2 potatoes, a bunch of kale, a wedge of sharp cheese, and the rosemary. I didn't write it down. I remembered without effort. Not everything fades. At church, they gave me a chair in the back of the craft room. No introductions. Just a space, some yarn, and a woman across from me who knit without looking down. Her name was Ellie. I learned that by overhearing, not through announcement. She spoke like someone who knew quiet could be a form of presence. One afternoon, she reached for the wrong spool and knocked mine off the table. I picked it up for her. She didn't say thank you, just looked at my hands and said, "You're not from around here, not really." I nodded. She tied a knot, then added, "They moved me out of my house last year, said it was time." I smiled all the way out the door. We didn't speak much after that. But each Thursday, she pulled a chair next to mine instead of across. The knot between us tightened softly. A woman from the community center called about a new program. It's for older women looking to start small businesses. "Just a few hours a week. We heard you built something real back in the day." Back in the day? I almost laughed, then said, "I don't teach branding, just the math and the bones. That's what they need," she replied. The first session had 6 women. None asked for my resume. None mentioned the company name. One of them wore a shirt with a mustard stain on the cuff. Another brought her toddler. I showed them how to cost ingredients, how to speak to banks, how to separate their names from their numbers. At the end, one said I didn't think I was allowed to think this way. I didn't correct her. When I got home, Joan's name lit up my phone, a forwarded message. The board wanted to schedule a vote on branding alignment. Claire had attached a brief. The subject line read, "Re-establishing Legacy Narrative." I didn't open it. Joan's note was short. "They'd like you to attend. In person or on Zoom?" I typed slowly. "I won't be present, and I don't need to be." The reply came an hour later. Understood. I filed the exchange in a folder named Final. On the windowsill, a small tray held my old watch, a silver band with scratches at the buckle. I hadn't worn it in weeks. Not because I didn't keep time anymore, but because I no longer needed to measure mine against theirs. Ellie once handed me a lemon square she'd wrapped in wax paper. "No nuts," she said. I remember from last time. I don't recall telling her I didn't like nuts. Some people listen with more than their ears. Claire's voice used to fill a room before she entered it. Her scent, her heels, her ringtone all arrived in advance. One time, she brushed lint off my blazer and murmured, "Let's make sure we don't upstage the guests." That was when I stopped wearing red. Now in the garden, I wore whatever shirt was clean and soft. A faded green one, the collar a little uneven. The soil darkened the knees of my pants. I didn't scrub it out. Scott's name appeared once on caller ID that month. I didn't pick up. There was no voicemail. I made lists in a new notebook. Not tasks, just names of flowers, phone numbers of women from class, the measurements for my favorite soup. None of it for business. All of it for use. A woman named Clara in her 60s brought a flyer to class one day. "I want to open a hair salon that doesn't play loud music," she said. Another added, "Or talk over you like you're invisible." We spent an hour just drawing chairs, not logos. Just chairs. I kept their designs in a folder beside my stove. One night, I found the old business card holder I used to carry. Gold-edged, heavy. I opened it and pulled out the top card. It read, "Gloria Easton, CEO." I placed it under the orchid pot without a word. The roots had begun to steady. Not bloom yet, but hold. Joan texted again. "They're updating the executive bios on the site. Do you want a quote included?" I didn't answer. Later that week, Ellie brought me a clipping from the local paper. "They want someone to teach computer basics at the library," she said. I looked at the ad, then handed it back. She shrugged. "Didn't think you would. Just thought you should know you could." The rosemary had begun to flower. Small blue blooms, not the kind that boast, but the kind that appear when you've stopped checking. And that night, when I folded my clothes, I paused at the hem of the green shirt. A thread had loosened. I left it. Not everything broken needs repair. Some things need room to unravel just enough to feel like breath. I didn't open the inbox again that weekend. And when I passed by the mirror, I didn't fix my collar. I looked at my own eyes and said nothing back. I used to think closure looked like applause, or maybe a firm handshake under soft lighting. Now I know it's quieter than that, less cinematic, more like sealing an envelope without checking it twice. I sat at the kitchen table, the one with a small chip on the corner from when I dropped the brass letter opener. The chip had darkened over time like skin healing around a scar. I didn't buff it out. I placed the envelope flat, the flap unsealed. The papers were stacked inside in the same order I would have presented them at a board meeting back when I still rehearsed transitions in my head. One sheet transferred my voting shares to the foundation. Not a family trust. Not an advisory body. Just a community fund run by 6 women who'd once kept Easton Technologies from unraveling during its 3rd acquisition. 2 of them hadn't been invited to the last anniversary gala. One still answered emails from her flip phone. They knew what it meant to hold something without branding it. Another sheet outlined my formal refusal to appear in public digital or print material associated with the Easton family. The wording had taken longer than I expected, not because I doubted the choice, but because I wanted it to carry weight without echo. Joan would know how to read between the lines. I had found the old plastic badge in the drawer where I kept spare rubber bands and expired coupons. The photo on it was 10 years out of date. My hair was tighter, my chin more sure. Under my name was the word founder in a font slightly larger than the others. A detail I once fought for. I didn't remember why anymore. Scott had sent a text the day before. No greeting, no closing. Just marketing needs clarification on your current title for the Q4 report. I stared at it for a while before locking the phone. The screen reflected my face back to me faintly. When I handed Joan the envelope, she didn't ask. She just slid it into her bag, the one she always carried on her left shoulder. Her nails were still painted a soft pearl shade, like they were when we first interviewed assistants 2 decades ago. She had chosen not to promote herself upward. I never asked why. I respected it more than I said. Claire's assistant left a voicemail the same morning. Something about a press kit update and continuity in the leadership narrative. I deleted it before she finished the sentence. Continuity was never my job, it was what they needed after they erased origin. Back at the table, I picked up the badge again. I held it by its lanyard, watching it turn, slightly catching the light, like something trying to matter. Then I set it down and pressed my thumb to the plastic until it cracked. Not all the way, just enough to break the laminate seal. In the wastebasket by the sink, I placed it under a used paper towel, beside the rind of a blood orange I had peeled too cleanly. The scent lingered. I didn't rinse my hands. The last thing I did was write Joan a note folded in half unsealed. It said only this: "Thank you for standing at the edge and not asking me to turn around." A month ago, I might have hesitated. I might have imagined Scott pacing some corner office, crafting a reason to convince me I was overreacting. Claire might have smiled in that way she did when speaking to cameras, half apology, half ambition. I used to think silence was surrender. I don't think that anymore. I kept no copies of the documents. I deleted the drafts. I removed the folder from my computer, cleared the trash, and closed the lid. When it asked if I was sure, I didn't read twice. Ellie knocked once on my door that evening. She brought over a batch of corn muffins in a tin too big for one person. "They're plain," she said. "No surprises." I offered her tea. She didn't sit, just leaned against the doorframe, eyes scanning the living room. "You took down the photograph," she observed. "I mailed it back," I said. "To him, to the office." She hummed once and nodded. "Good. They know what it looked like. No need for reminders." When she left, I didn't close the door right away. I stood there for a minute, holding the knob with one hand, the other resting against the frame. Then I shut it softly and slid the latch. I didn't lock it, but I didn't leave it open either. That night, I sat by the window. The lamp beside me clicked once before the light steadied. On the sill, the orchid had one leaf browning at the edge. I didn't trim it. I watched it curl slightly as though folding into itself. Somewhere behind me in the drawer where I kept stationery was the card Claire had given me years ago after the IPO. It said in silver cursive, "We couldn't have done it without you." I'd read it once, then slipped it into the back of a drawer behind the holiday stamps. I tore it up without ceremony. Not out of spite, just clarity. There was a time I thought legacy meant being remembered. Now I think it means not needing to be. The quiet doesn't press against me anymore. It rests beside me like an old shawl I no longer mind wearing. The porcelain teapot gave a gentle click as I set it down. The kind of sound I used to overlook. I poured slowly, letting the warmth rise through the steam. The cup was slightly chipped on the rim, a flaw I once meant to fix, but no longer saw as urgent. I unfolded the letter again, creased at the corners. The handwriting wavered, careful in its intent. "Grandma, I miss the princess stories. I drew you a castle. There was a small sketch tucked inside, made with thick crayon strokes. The towers leaned. The sun had a face. I hadn't spoken to Scott in months. Claire had not reached out. But Logan's drawings still arrived in envelopes postmarked from their side of town. Someone must have helped him address them. Perhaps the nanny. Perhaps not. I didn't ask. The letter stayed on the table beside a single photograph V standing in front of the company building on the day it opened. No ribbon, no crowd, just me. Back then, I wore a navy blouse that never quite fit right in the shoulders. I'd kept it anyway, stored in the back of a drawer with a faint scent of cedar and old resolve. No emails had been opened that morning. I didn't need to see them. I hadn't returned Joan's message about the upcoming board vote. She'd understand. She always had a way of knowing what I meant by what I didn't say. The soil in the clay pot by the window had darkened overnight. A green shoot had broken through. I touched it lightly, careful not to bend it. Growth never makes a sound. The ceramic mug in my hand warmed my knuckles. I wrote a few lines in the small notebook I kept tucked under the woven placemat. Simple things, nothing polished. Just sentences for Logan someday. There's a kind of bravery in choosing quiet, not silence. Quiet. Across the street, a delivery van reversed and drove off. No one knocked. No one rang. That had once left me unsettled. Now it simply meant the tea stayed warm longer. The phone lit up once a name I recognized and didn't tap. I let it dim on its own. I had already answered enough calls in my life that began with, "We just want you to clarify one thing," and ended with, "You'll still be mentioned, of course." Logan's castle stood propped against a glass jar of seed packets. He had drawn a small door on it slightly ajar. I ran a finger along the crayon lines and wondered if he'd meant for someone to come through or to keep someone out. I hadn't written a plan in over a year. No projections. No quarterly reports. Only short letters with no return address, sometimes not even signed. Words written just to exist. The clock on the wall didn't tick. Its battery had long gone, but I never replaced it. Time passed without my permission now, and I found no reason to interrupt it. At the market, the cashier had asked if I lived alone. "Looks peaceful," she'd said, glancing at my basket. "Just breadfruit and a single jar of raspberry jam." Once, Claire looked at my bookshelf and commented, "You always liked old stories. I guess you don't need new ones now." I hadn't responded. Some sentences are their own answers. The teacup left a faint ring on the wood. I didn't wipe it away. I began a new page in the notebook. Sometimes not explaining is the clearest thing we ever do. A single bird landed on the balcony railing and stayed longer than usual. I didn't move. I watched it shift its weight once, twice, then lift off again. No flourish. Just enough. I folded Logan's letter one more time, slower this time, and slid it back into the envelope. I didn't seal it. Some things don't need to be shut completely. The light moved along the floor, soft and unspectacular. It didn't ask anything of me. I placed the cup down. No one was waiting. Nothing was missing. And still I was here,